Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Eugene Callahan. I'm 35 years old, and if you saw me today, sitting in my Mountain View home with a Labrador at my feet and a steaming cup of coffee in hand, you might assume my life's always been calm, maybe even blessed. But the truth? It's stained. With fists, with manipulation, and with a betrayal so deep, I almost lost myself. I grew up in East Anselm, Nebraska. A speck of a town where gossip spreads faster than fire and reputation is currency. My parents, Patrick and Lorna Callahan, owned the only auto repair shop for 20 miles, which made them kings in their own right. But kings can be cruel. My earliest memories aren't bedtime stories or family dinners. They're oil-stained coveralls, the sour smell of whiskey, and the sound of my mother sighing in disappointment because I wasn't man enough to handle a wrench the way Dad did. I was quiet, bookish. Obsessed with rocks, maps, and soil layers, things that didn't make you useful in my father's world. "You're a dreamer, Eugene," he'd sneer, beer in hand. And dreamers starve. By age 16, I'd already learned not to argue. I'd retreat into geology textbooks, hide in the field behind our house, and map out fake expeditions across invisible continents. It was how I survived. But what I didn't know then, what no kid ever expects, is that your own parents might one day sell your life like it's cattle. It started shortly after my 28th birthday. I was living in Denver, working as a junior geologist for a mineral exploration firm, living modestly but freely. I had a girlfriend, Mia, who taught elementary school and always brought me little lunchbox notes with doodles of crystals and "I love yous." One Friday, my mother called. "You need to come home. Now." Something in her voice, tight, rushed, told me it wasn't just one of her guilt trips. So I drove back to East Anselm, through the same dusty roads that once felt like prison bars. I walked into the house and saw my father in a collared shirt, something he hadn't worn since my high school graduation. My mother was pacing. Something was off. Then they dropped the bomb. "There's a girl. Her name's Violet. Her father owns half the farmland around town. She was in an accident. Paralyzed. They want you to marry her." I blinked, thinking it was some sick joke. "What the hell are you talking about?" My dad's jaw flexed. "Robert Lane offered us 200 grand if you agree." 200,000, Eugene. You could finally pay off your loans, start something of your own. Don't act like you're too good for this. I was frozen. "You want me to marry a woman I don't know, for money?" My mother looked away, but not before I caught the flicker of shame in her eyes. "She's a good girl. Quiet. Educated. She needs someone. You'd be doing a good thing." I stood there, rage tightening my throat. "You're not even pretending this is for me." My father leaned back, lighting a cigarette. "Don't be dramatic. You've always been a loner. You think Mia's gonna stick around when things get hard? Violet's family is offering you a future." I didn't know then that Mia had already been contacted. That my own mother, behind my back, had met her for coffee and told her Eugene's meant for more than coloring books and dreams. That my parents had planted seeds, whispering lies, pushing her away. I didn't know until 2 days later, when Mia left. No goodbye. Just a note. "Your family doesn't believe I'm good enough for you." Maybe they're right. I called her over and over. Nothing. The woman I thought I'd spend my life with, gone. And in the silence that followed, my parents pounced. "She wasn't strong enough anyway," my mother said. "Violet would never abandon you." And just like that, the trap was set. They pushed hard. Manipulated harder. My dad pulled out the family debt, said if I didn't help, he'd lose the shop and my little sister Claire wouldn't be able to go to college. My mother cried. Claimed I was cold-hearted. That I owed them this. I was exhausted. Broken. Alone. And Violet? She was polite. Soft-spoken. Her wheelchair didn't bother me, what did was that I could see in her eyes, she didn't want this either. She was part of the transaction, just like me. I asked her once, do you even want this? She hesitated. I've been told it's what's best for me. We got married in a quiet courthouse ceremony. No flowers. No laughter. Just two strangers, bound by desperation and betrayal. I moved into a small house Violet's father bought us. My days blurred, work, silence, sleep. The only warmth I got came from emails from Claire, telling me she missed me, that she knew what they'd done was wrong. I felt hollow. I'd lost Mia. My dreams. My freedom. But the worst part? I hadn't even hit rock bottom yet. If the betrayal had shattered me, what followed buried the pieces. I tried. God, I tried to make something out of nothing. Violet and I shared a roof, a dinner table, and sometimes a movie on the living room TV, but there was no laughter, no light. We were two strangers orbiting the same quiet void. She was kind. That was the worst part. She never raised her voice, never demanded anything from me. But the silence between us was deafening. At work, I buried myself in mineral analysis and core samples. I'd leave early and come home late, hoping maybe if I stayed away long enough, this life wouldn't feel real. But every evening, I'd come back to that same stillness. Violet would be reading. Or knitting. Or staring out the window at nothing at all. We spoke in fragments. How was work, she'd ask. Fine. Dinner's in the oven. Thanks. And that was it. The only conversations that weren't stifled came from my parents, always on the phone, always asking for more. You think just 'cause you got a wife and a job you're done with us, my father snapped one night after calling me drunk. You owe us. That shop was supposed to be yours. We gave it up for this marriage. My mother wasn't any better. Claire still needs help with tuition. And we're behind on the mortgage. You're the only one doing well, Eugene. Help your family. Family. That word used to mean something. Now it felt like a noose. I remember one night, late January, snow falling soft against the windows, I came home and Violet was watching a nature documentary. The soft sound of wolves howling through the TV filled the room. She turned to me. Do you ever feel like you're watching your life instead of living it? I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She already knew. I slept on the couch almost every night, partly because I thought it was the decent thing to do, partly because I didn't want to be close to anyone. I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, thinking about Mia. Wondering if she'd found someone else. Wondering if she'd ever really loved me, or if my mother had been right all along. But then, one evening, everything shifted. It was late March. I came home early, a rare thing, and found Violet crying. She was curled up in her wheelchair, the remote in her lap, tears streaking silently down her face. I stood frozen at the door, unsure if I should go to her or pretend I hadn't seen it. She looked up. And for the first time, she spoke without caution. I didn't want this either, Eugene. Her voice was hoarse, her body trembling. I didn't want to trap you. I didn't want to be a burden. But they made it sound like it was my only chance at a life. I pulled up a chair beside her. My heart twisted, not from obligation, but from a new kind of pain. One I hadn't expected. I thought I'd be dead by now, she whispered, voice shaking. After the accident, I lost everything. My legs, my career plans, my boyfriend. My dad said if I didn't settle down, I'd just rot away. So he found me a husband. I clenched my fists. You deserve more than that. We both do. She looked at me, her eyes red but fierce. Then why do we keep living like ghosts? That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up, went outside into the bitter cold, and sat on the porch. For the first time in years, I cried. Quiet, ugly sobs that I buried into my coat sleeve. Not just for myself, but for Violet, too. We were both pawns. Both used by people who claimed to love us. And what broke me most? I let it happen. I stayed silent when I should have fought. I let them walk all over me and ruin the one relationship that actually made me believe I had a future. Something inside me cracked that night. The grief turned to anger. The anger turned to focus. And that focus whispered one thing over and over. They don't get to win. Something changed after that night on the porch. The numbness didn't disappear, but it shifted into something sharper. Purposeful. I started noticing things. In Violet's eyes. In the pauses between her words. In the way she avoided looking at the mail from her father's estate, even though he'd passed months ago. And then, one afternoon, I saw it, buried beneath a stack of unopened envelopes in the kitchen drawer. A letter addressed to Violet in a thick cream envelope with a corporate seal. From the Department of Land and Mineral Resources, I read aloud. Why didn't you open this? Violet wheeled in and stopped short. I didn't want to. It's about Dad's land. I frowned. What about it? She hesitated, then shook her head. I don't know. He always said it was worthless. Just a bunch of rocks. He kept it because it reminded him of Mom. But something inside me buzzed. Call it instinct, or maybe just my geologist's itch, but I tore the envelope open and scanned the contents. What I saw made my stomach twist. Preliminary survey data. Notes on trace mineral readings. And one word underlined 3 times. Lithium. My heart pounded. Violet, I said slowly, holding the page up. Do you understand what this means? She blinked. No. Why? Your dad's land, those hills out past Fremont Ridge, it might have lithium deposits. That's one of the most valuable minerals in the world right now. Batteries, tech, clean energy, if there's a real deposit there, it could be worth tens of millions. She stared at me, her expression unreadable. Are you sure? I'm not just sure, I said. This could change everything. I spent the next week obsessed. I pulled topographic maps, arranged access to old survey data, even took a few days off work to drive to the ridge myself. I walked that land, picked up rock samples, and nearly screamed when I saw the glint of what I'd only dreamed of, hard spodumene crystals in weathered granite. A textbook lithium-bearing formation. I sent the samples to the company lab under a different name to avoid raising questions. When the results came back, my hands shook. High-grade lithium. The kind people wage wars over. The kind that tech billionaires salivate for. When I told Violet, she stared at me for a long moment. My father never believed I was capable of anything, she said softly. But maybe this is mine to fix. There was more. That letter from the department wasn't just a casual survey, they had already offered to lease the land for initial testing. Her father had refused. Probably too proud or too ignorant to understand what he had. But Violet? She had full rights now. She was the sole heir. We talked for hours that night. For the first time, as real partners. She asked smart questions. Legal questions. Ethical ones. She didn't just want money, she wanted to make sure it was done right. Sustainable mining. Community benefit. Long-term stewardship. And as we planned, something inside me stirred. Not just hope, something deeper. Respect. Admiration. Maybe even love. But the deeper we dug, both into the land and the documents, something darker surfaced. I found a notarized copy of Violet's father's original mineral lease negotiation. The name of the consultant? Patrick Callahan. My father. He'd known. He'd worked on the land years ago. And somehow, he'd buried the truth. Because if we were worth millions, we might not be controllable anymore. That was the real reason he arranged this marriage. Not out of desperation. Not for family pride. But for leverage. He knew. He knew Violet's land held gold disguised as dust, and he made damn sure I'd be legally tied to it. I stared at the paper, rage simmering like lava in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. My father had played me like a pawn. And I wasn't going to let him win. The moment I saw my father's name on that document, black ink stamped beside a mineral lease he pretended never existed, something in me cracked. Not broke. Broke implies surrender. This was different. This was cold. Controlled. Calculated. The man who had berated me for chasing a career in geology, who laughed when I brought home rock samples, who told me I'd never amount to anything poking around in dirt, had known all along how valuable Violet's land was. And instead of telling me, instead of doing the right thing, he weaponized it. He sold me into a marriage not out of fatherly desperation, but because he saw a way to steal from both me and Violet. And the worst part? It nearly worked. But not anymore. The rage I felt didn't explode. It sharpened. Became a blade. I didn't want to just win. I wanted to dismantle everything he thought he controlled, piece by piece. And the first step? Make sure he never saw it coming. I didn't tell my parents anything. Not about the lithium. Not about the survey. Not about the deal Violet and I were quietly finalizing with a clean energy company based in Portland. We moved quietly, through back channels. I hired a discreet lawyer to help Violet establish a trust under her name, one I wouldn't appear on until all contracts were secured. She was hesitant at first. I trust you, Eugene, she said one night, her fingers brushing mine at the kitchen table. And that's why I want it in your name, I told her. Let them keep thinking they trapped us. While we build something that can't be touched. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the dignity. The freedom. The autonomy my family tried to rob from us both. But I needed more. I needed proof. I wanted to expose what they did to me, and to Mia. So I called Claire. She had always been the quiet one. Younger than me by 8 years. The only one in the family who never looked at me with judgment in her eyes. Claire, I said gently, I need to ask you something. And I need the truth. She didn't hesitate. I know what they did to Mia, she said. I overheard Mom. She offered her $10,000 to break up with you. Said you'd never be free if you stayed with her. Said Violet was your future whether you liked it or not. I closed my eyes, the air in my chest turning to ice. I didn't say anything back then, Claire whispered. I was scared. I thought maybe they knew better. But I've hated myself for it ever since. You don't need to hate yourself, I said. Not anymore. Just help me make it right. Over the next few weeks, I gathered everything I needed. Claire sent me screenshots of texts between her and my mother. I found voicemail recordings I'd forgotten were saved, my father shouting at me to man up and marry the girl before the deal falls through. I got a friend from law school to help me build a case of coercion, blackmail, and even fraud, because by hiding the mineral value of the land and profiting from it, my father might have crossed more than one legal line. But the real dagger? The email from Violet's late father's former lawyer. He had originally drafted a separate will, one that gave full rights of the land directly to Violet without condition. But that will never made it to probate court. Why? Because my father, Patrick Callahan, convinced him to delay submission while he reviewed legal concerns with the family. The implication was clear. He tampered. Deliberately. He wanted to buy time. Time to lock me into a marriage before Violet knew the truth. Time to make me believe this life was the only option I had. I took all of it, documents, emails, call logs, and filed them into a digital folder labeled Payback. Then I waited. Waited for the lithium contract to finalize. Waited for the money to hit Violet's trust. Waited for them to come crawling, because I knew they would. Sure enough, my father called me a week later. "Eugene," he said, his voice syrupy and fake. "Heard you've been working on a new project out near Fremont Ridge. Thought you said that land was useless." I smiled. "Guess I was wrong." He chuckled. "Well, I'm glad you're finally seeing some success. Maybe it's time we talked about the future. I've been thinking, it might be good to get the shop back up and running. Maybe open a second one in Fremont." I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear. "That sounds expensive." "Oh, it is," he said casually. "But with the right investor, we could." "I'm not interested," I cut in. "And neither is Violet. The land belongs to her, Dad. You never owned it. You just tried to play us both." Silence. Then, "Eugene." I hung up. The trap was set. But I wasn't done. They hadn't just stolen my choices. They'd stolen my pride. My love. My self-worth. And I was about to take it all back, starting with the truth. The thing about revenge, real, poetic revenge, is that it doesn't shout. It whispers. It lingers in rooms long after you leave. It doesn't come with slammed doors or broken windows. It arrives dressed in silence and truth. And the truth was finally mine. The day the mining rights contract was signed, Violet and I didn't celebrate. We sat in the garden, our overgrown patch behind the little house, with coffee in hand and dirt on our shoes. The daisies we planted that spring were blooming again, gentle and defiant. I looked over at her and said quietly, "It's time." She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. Underscore 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 underscore. First, I filed the legal complaint with the State Mineral Commission. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it was a notice. A detailed account of Patrick Callahan's unregistered role in manipulating mineral lease delays, land rights interference, and suspected coercion of both land heirs and marriage arrangements. Attached were the original mineral report with his signature, the delayed will submission timeline, the contract with Robert Lane and my father's back-channel communications. I CC'd it to the local news station. And the regional one. And a few national environmental watchdog groups that love stories of small-town greed meets mineral corruption. Within 48 hours, a reporter called me. Within a week, the headline hit. Exclusive, family forced son into sham marriage to secure mineral-rich land, now worth millions. And beneath it? A photo of Violet and me, not staged, not dramatic. Just us sitting on the porch, tired, real, and unbothered. The second part was personal. I invited Claire to dinner. She arrived nervous, tugging at the sleeves of her hoodie, unsure of what I might say. I placed an envelope in front of her. "What's this?" she asked. "A trust," I said. "For you. University fund. Rent support. Whatever you need. You're the only one in that house who didn't try to sell me off like livestock. I'll never forget that." Tears filled her eyes. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. I smiled. "But I want to. Just promise me you'll live your own life. Not theirs." She nodded. And that was enough. Then came the final blow. It was a Tuesday when I visited the old auto shop, my father's kingdom. The place where I first learned what humiliation tasted like. The place where I was told my dreams were useless, my ideas worthless. He stood behind the counter, flipping through papers. "Eugene," he said, surprised but smug. "Heard you've been busy." I stepped forward, calm. "Precise." "I'm buying this place," I said. "Not for you. For me. You're in default with the state tax board." I made an offer they couldn't refuse. He froze. "What?" "I'm turning it into a community tech lab," I said, voice steady. "For kids who want more than engines and oil changes. For kids like I used to be. Smart. Overlooked. Dreamers." His face twisted. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I know I'm nothing like you." And then I dropped the last document on the counter, the public exposure statement with his name plastered all over it. He picked it up, scanned it, and went pale. "You ruined your own name, Dad," I said. "I just turned the lights on." He lunged at me, but age had caught up with him. He stumbled, breath heaving, sweat beading on his forehead. I didn't flinch. I just looked him in the eye and said, "This is where your power ends." Then I walked out, quietly, finally, and for good. Back home, Violet met me at the door. "How do you feel?" she asked. I paused, taking in the sun dipping behind the horizon, our little house bathed in gold. "Lighter," I said. Like I finally exhaled. We stood there, hand in hand, two people who were never supposed to work, but somehow did. Because the beauty of revenge isn't in what you take. It's in what you reclaim. And I'd just reclaimed my life. Just when you think the story's over, when you think the past has finally loosened its grip, life throws you something that leaves you breathless. That moment came for me one quiet morning. The sky was clear. Violet was in the garden, humming softly as she watered the lavender bushes. I was inside, sifting through some legal paperwork tied to the trust. I needed a tax form she'd received months ago, one from her father's estate. She told me it was in the safe in the hallway closet. I'd never opened it before. The combination was easy, her birthday. Inside were a few documents, an old photo album, and something else. An envelope with my name on it. In Violet's handwriting. My hands froze. I pulled it out, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened it. "Eugene. If you're reading this, it means I finally trust you enough to tell you everything. I want you to know, I never meant to lie. But there's something you don't know about this land, and about me." I read each word slowly, and with every line, my stomach twisted tighter. Asterisk, I found the lithium report before we got married. I knew what the land was worth. My father knew too, but he was too scared to believe in me. He thought if I married you, someone with brains and ambition, we'd have the best chance of building something with it. He told me you'd been hurt, that your parents were pressuring you, and that maybe if we could build a life together, we'd both heal. So yes, he orchestrated the marriage. But so did I. I asked for you, asterisk. I dropped the letter. The world spun. Violet knew. She'd known before the wedding. She hadn't just been a victim in this. She had been part of the setup. I forced myself to keep reading. Asterisk, at first, I told myself it was just survival. That I had no choice. But then I met you. And you were kind. Even in your distance, your silence, you never lashed out. I watched you eat terrible microwave meals on the couch so I could have the bed. I watched you stay. And little by little, I fell in love with you, for real. Not for the money. Not for the minerals. For you. But I was too scared to tell you the truth, because I thought if you knew I helped plan this, you'd leave. I'm sorry, Eugene. I'm sorry I played a part in your pain. I hope one day, you'll forgive me. Violet asterisk. I sat there, the letter limp in my hands, my mouth dry. This woman, the woman who shared my nights, my dreams, my garden, had been part of the original betrayal. She hadn't just been collateral. She was part of the deal. I didn't speak to her that day. I couldn't. I went out, drove for hours through back roads, past hills and ridges I once thought were useless. All the trust I'd rebuilt in the last year felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I thought of Mia. Of how I swore I'd never be tricked again. And yet, here I was. Used. Again. But this time, it was different. Because even in the betrayal, there had been truth. Violet hadn't stayed quiet out of cruelty. She stayed quiet out of fear, just like I had. And that's when it hit me. Maybe this wasn't about revenge anymore. Maybe this was about healing. That night, I came home. Violet was in the living room, eyes red, the letter still on the table between us. She didn't speak. Just looked up at me, bracing herself. I read it, I said softly. She nodded. And I was angry, I added. I still am. Her voice cracked. You have every right to be. I stepped forward. But I also know what it's like to be cornered. To make impossible choices. And I know this life we've built, it wasn't fake. Not all of it. I took her hand. And for the first time since reading that letter, I felt grounded again. Next time, I said, just tell me the truth first. I can handle anything but lies. Violet nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I promise. We sat together in silence, our fingers entwined, not as perfect people, but as survivors. Of lies. Of family. Of ourselves. Because even when the past returns with a knife in its hand, sometimes, the wound it opens leads to something stronger. Something real. People think revenge means fire, scorched earth, nothing left behind. But that's not the truth. Revenge, real revenge, is rebuilding your life so brightly that the people who tried to break you have no choice but to squint when they look your way. And that's what Violet and I did. After the truth came out between us, things didn't magically go back to normal. But they got real. Honest. Raw. We started over, this time without secrets. We went to therapy, together and separately. We talked about the parts of ourselves we'd hidden for too long, her fear of being abandoned, my compulsion to run from anything that felt like home. And through all of it, we kept planting. The daisies out back bloomed every spring like clockwork. So did we. The lawsuit I filed with the state commission moved slowly, but steadily. By the end of the year, my father was officially blacklisted from any mineral contracting in Nebraska. His shop. Shuttered. Bought and transformed into a youth STEM center with a gleaming sign that read, "The Callahan Institute for Future Engineers." For the dreamers no one believed in. That was Claire's idea. She wanted to keep the name, not to honor our parents, but to redefine it. She's in her second year at MIT now, working on sustainable tech projects. Sometimes she calls just to thank me. I always tell her the same thing, you did the work. I just helped clear the path. As for Declan, the brother I nearly lost to my parents' toxicity, he's a writer now. Living in Seattle. Every Christmas he sends me a new story draft and signs it. To Eugene, the first person who showed me that surviving isn't the same as living. Violet's trust fund, fueled by the lithium royalties, grew larger than we'd ever imagined. But she didn't use it for luxury. Instead, she launched the North Ridge Foundation, an initiative that gives disabled women scholarships in STEM and pays for mobility tech for young girls across the Midwest. She says it's her way of giving her pain a purpose. One day, while watching her speak at a conference from my seat in the front row, I felt it hit me again, this overwhelming sense of rightness. Of peace. Not because everything was perfect. But because we built something out of ashes. My parents? They moved to a trailer outside town. Occasionally I get word from locals that my father still tells people he taught me everything I know. I let him talk. Let him lie. Because the truth is louder, even when it's silent. A year after everything unfolded, I took Violet back to the ridge where it all began. We stood on the hill, watching the sun melt behind the distant trees. She turned to me. If you could go back, would you change it? I thought about it. The betrayal. The pain. The couch nights, the cold silences, the crushing disappointment. Then I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who once felt like a stranger, and now felt like gravity itself. I took her hand. No, I said. Because it brought me here. She smiled. And the wind, gentle through the grass, whispered like it agreed. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.